I've been in Q&As with Martin Scorsese and Johnny Depp and really top of their game. And they're like, yeah, we're struggling to find money. We did some crazy stuff. I remember doing a short film where we put loads of fireworks inside the warehouse and let them off. And if you've ever done some of that on camera, just, it's
With
mental.
all due respect, I live in Malta. That happens quite frequently.
Yeah, but inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
London, in the centre, and there's a massive warehouse, and we let fireworks off all inside the warehouse. And
Okay.
Now thinking about it, it was so dangerous. I think the greatest thing anyone can say to you is, no, you can't do something, because that if you have the right mentality, you can go and just go, well, actually, no, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to do it better than I thought I was going to do it, or I'm going to achieve it quicker, or I'm going to get, results that were different, or whatever it may be. So you need that. I think you need to be told no, otherwise life is just like,
It is an absolute delight to be sitting down with Matt Hookings, actor, producer, writer and entrepreneur, who founded Camelot Films in 2013 and is responsible for titles such as Prizefighter, alongside the epic Russel, Crowe and Winston. Other titles include Winter Ridge, The Grand Duke of Corsica and The Edge of Tomorrow, and currently working on The Awakening, which I'll be grilling Matt about later on. However, this is not the first time I've sat down with Matt, and when we interviewed before, I was left with more questions than answers. So I wanted to sit down with you again. Matt, here we are again. How lovely to see you.
scary.
Matt, it's so good to be sitting down with you again. But first up, I would like you to share with me the journey of you becoming interested in films, because this is quite a bit of a story.
Yeah, no, thank you for the intro. It's very kind. And it's good to sit down with you again. We just laugh off camera, so it's fine all the time. How did I start in film?
Yeah.
What was the
No,
question?
starting being interested in films, because you remember the first time we spoke, you shared this story with me, and I don't think you've shared it before.
What story?
Don't you even pretend.
I have a weird story on that. So when I was about 5 or 6, back home in Wales, I stumbled across the original Chucky, which came out in like 1970s.
Okay.
And it's a horror film about the doll, people don't know what, too much about it. And it just basically left a mark.
How old were you at this time?
Like 5 or 6.
5 or 6, and you're walking. How on earth did you get hold of Chucky?
I think it was just on like Channel 5. And
What?
I was watching it late at night by accident. I've always had a very overactive brain, so stumbled across it. I think I became obsessed with it and also scared and also traumatized. So that left a really sort of big imprint on my brain for a while as a 5 or 6 year old. And I think for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was just no sleep, dreaming nightmares. I remember waking up, I still remember it this day. I remember waking up and just seeing it in the corner of the room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What were your mum and dad saying at the time?
I mean, my mum was just, it was crazy because my mum was just like, go to sleep. Like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. But I was waking up like screaming. Like,
And you told them that you'd seen this?
That's a good question. I think they'd realised, but then putting the two together took slightly longer. So,
Okay.
First couple of nights you think, okay, he's just young, having a bad night's sleep. But after a few days, it was, again, I started seeing the doll. I think actually I started scaring my mum because I started to sound like the doll as well. Like, doing
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, so that was a bit crazy. And then eventually the suggestion, I think I went to the doctors or my mum took me somewhere and said, look, he can't sleep. He's seen Chucky, the original, that's, caused this traumatized him to some degree. And one of the suggestions was to put something else on at night, like another TV show or film that was like happy or had a nice process behind it, because then that would be the last thing I'd remember before going to sleep. So that triggered the start of basically watching a film or a TV show or something every night. And I've pretty much done that ever since. Yeah. So.
Okay, oh my word. But okay, big questions. So you've seen Chucky, to be counteracted by other films. What kind of films are we talking about? Obviously not thrillers or horror movies.
No, but just everything. You know, the easy. I remember watching Home Alone a lot over and over again. That was one of the easiest things. As I started to grow up, I started to get more into TV series. Then I started to get more into the older films, like from way back. You know, like It's a Wonderful Life or some of the old Humphrey Bogart films, James Cagney, you know, Marlon Brando, all that kind of stuff. So taking way back. So as I got older, I became more interested in, actually, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing different stories and different characters, and also different time periods. I became really fascinated with the time period that film was made. Whenever you go back now and watch a really old film, it's fascinating, not just because of the characters, but the time period of what was going on. Even the way people speak, the way, you know, men used to speak to women, or the way women used to react in certain instances, and the stories and everything. So I became fascinated with that. And when you then get more into the film side and the acting, you then start to realize how important stories and characters was back then, because they didn't have the tools or the technology we have today. So.
And it was as it was. It was really interesting that you say that, because recently it came up on my feed to a film that was from 2000, What Women Want.
Okay.
With
Mel
Gibson and Helen Hunt. And I was watching it and I was thinking to myself, if that was remade now, would we still have those same conversations? And it really got me thinking about that, and the way that the dialogue was. Sure. You know, it's a story about a male chauvinist. But I was thinking to myself, would it still be as relevant? Could we still do that now? And it's really interesting you talking about that sort of historical reference for the films that you were watching. What did you take away from that?
God, so much. You know, apart from the way people acted and talked, you know, the time period of what was going on at that time, the historical aspect, you know, looking at an old film is like reading a book on history. You know, what they eat, the way they dress, the way they speak. So everything, and you know, it's changing so much. Like, you know, What Women Want doesn't seem that long ago to me, even though now it's like, you know,
25
years ago. So when you go back another 25 years, and another 25 years, you really, if you're interested in life and people and places, then, you know, you'll just be blown away by what you see on screen. And it just fascinated me.
Did you ever watch Chucky again?
No, it's weird. I remember going to a Halloween party when I used to live in London, and I remember someone being dressed as Chucky, and I was like 25 or 26 at the time, and I was just like, oh no.
Is it out of there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I could probably pick it up now because I have a very different mindset of how films are made and stuff. But yeah, it's weird. It triggered that, and you know, like I said, I say this quite confidently. I've watched more films than most people, like even older people or more, you know, people more like a film critic, because I've watched, you know, films every single day, and sometimes I've gone through 7 or 8 films a day. Yeah, that was way back in the research days of, you know, really trying to hone my craft and understand, because I always thought that if I was going to take this business seriously and do well, I really need to understand the foundations and not just go back and watch one film, like watch, you know, 10 films or 20 films that were made in 1959 and really understand the context of the history and everything. And that's part of my obsessive
Every time you say something, Matt, there's like 1,000 questions that come out of that. You're not making this very easy for me, because I immediately want to say to you, okay, so you've seen thousands and thousands of films. Is there a go-to film? Is there the one that you kind of like, okay, this is a benchmark of this kind of production, or this is a benchmark for dialogue on film, or this is a benchmark, or this is just a benchmark for Friday night films when I've got myself a pizza and I just want entertainment?
It depends, because you know, when I look at films now, usually it's a particular research of a particular another project that I'm, you know, involved in or invested in. So with Prizefighter, for example, you know, I think I stopped counting at like 149 boxing films from 1927, which was the first film I saw was Alfred Hitchcock's first film in 1927 called The Ring, all the way up until, you know, 2025 or whatever. And I just wanted to see the whole process of like how people changed and which films worked, which films didn't. And there's no, honestly, I don't think there's actually a perfect film. you know, things fall into nostalgia of where you were at the time and stuff. Same with music. So there's lots of films that I go to that other people wouldn't. I really like things like Goodfellas and The Godfather and some of those films. I know they're similar in the sense of being crime, but they, you know, those films have to be so, the dialogue has to be so good, the acting has to be so good, the performance has to be so good, and you have so many different elements of, you know, violence, emotion, you know, pain, happiness, you know, having everything and then having nothing. So there's all those things. So it's very hard to make a good film anyway, let alone a perfect film. But there's a lot of films that I like in appreciation for the dialogue and the way characters moved. I really like The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart. That's amazing. You know, the original Bonnie and Clyde, the original Scarface. Yeah, it's I tend to gravitate towards true stories and things that were done really, you know, true to life and society. But, you know, I also like a lot of new stuff as well. But now it's just hard. Now it's hard finding the time to watch stuff.
But there are films that are, it's interesting is listening to you, because there's films that are very definitive for time periods. For instance, I keep seeing this reference, The Breakfast Club.
Right.
Love that film. I don't know if you've seen it over and over and over and over again. And it really defines a particular era. And it sets the scene. And every time you go back there, the power of film being that you are transported into, I guess, where you were the first time you ever saw that film, or who you were with and who you were at the cinema with, and whether you had a snog afterwards and all these sorts of things. But it really is a reference point for so many other things that are very personal as well. If you're Generation X, for instance, like I am, then that film really defines that era. And that's the mystery and the absolute wonder of film. So I want to then come to you and ask you, you've gone through this whole Chucky process and you've watched films over and over and over again. And I'm assuming that's where your love of film grew from. But that's a long step, going from watching Chucky as a 5-year-old to now being a writer, a producer, and of course, an actor. So we've missed out a big bunch in the middle. What happened there?
Yeah, so I started acting when I was like extremely young, like at 10 or 11, just in school plays and stuff, and got the bug for that. So I really enjoyed that, and then ended up doing more plays. I did. You know, I did a play called A Streetcar Named Desire, which was the original Marlon Brando. Did that in front of, you know, I think we had 500 or 600 people when I was, 15, no, was I 15, 16, something like that? Yeah. So the acting really fell into place as a way to kind of express myself in that kind of medium. And then obviously still loving the films because I was still watching them and being fascinated. And you know, I had a very, you know, very sort of, you know, working class upbringing in terms of in Wales. You know, my first job was McDonald's. I worked in a law firm as well. So I I stayed on at school, but also juggled that between working in McDonald's and then worked in a law firm as well, which was kind of a weird mix. So that carried through school, and then I went to university in Winchester. And carried on studying. Yeah, I studied film and American business, which is a weird mix. I know.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I did a drama play there as well during university. And then I got given an opportunity to become a background artist on a film almost immediately after I finished university. And I just jumped to it. I just thought, okay, this would be a great experience.
To be a what?
Like an extra, background
Okay.
And that was an amazing experience because I got thrown into like a 6 to 8 week boot camp of, you know, there was like a couple of hundred of us. So there was lots of young men, you know, kind of competing to stay on this film the longest time. And, you know, they're being paid as well. So I threw myself into that and just really enjoyed it. And I got lucky because I started to learn things from, you know, really successful stunt coordinators, and I got trained by one of the best bow and arrow, you know, marksmen in the world, like all these different things, you know, falls and all these crazy stuff that you hear about in films. So I got down to like a core sub stunt team where there wasn't many of us. I think it was like 10 or 15 of us. And then because of the acting side as well, the things I was doing started showing up on camera, and obviously it was relatively good because I was, acting and responding to the scenes, and there was lots of explosions and fire scenes and all this kind of stuff. So from that point, I just moved to London and just had a career as a stuntman for like 2-3 years on like some major Hollywood films. I did a bunch of, I probably worked on about 50 Hollywood productions in 2.5 years, 3 years, quite intensively, every single day, 6 days a week, just jumping from each project to each project.
And just throwing your heart right into that.
Yeah.
And saying that's what you want to do.
It wasn't at the time, I still loved the acting, but it was like, this is my way in. It was Hollywood. It was, I was 22, 23.
There were some titles.
Maleficent with Angelina Jolie, Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, Avengers 2.
Okay, so we're not talking about
Huntsman.
small.
No, these were big.
We're talking about big productions.
These were big things.
And you were early 20s.
Yeah. So in London, getting paid well. And for me, there was a lot of standing and waiting around. Only like 20% of it was actually like, wow, I'm doing something fun now, like a fight sequence or a fall or a fire burn or, or a bit of dialogue with the other actress or actor. And then as my brain works, being fascinated by stuff, instead of the 80% of the time where we were standing around, instead of going off and, talking with some guys or having a cigarette, or some of the guys used to go to sleep or whatever, because it'd just be time to kill, I was just watching everything. I was watching that person, hundreds of people on set, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent. And I was just like, okay, who's that person? What is he getting paid for? Okay, and who's that person? And who's that person? And that I don't like that. I think I could have done better than that. Or, just picking out things and starting to see mistakes. So that was a really great, valuable learning experience. I was learning, I was interested, I was building a network of people because things I was doing right. Oh, Matt, you're great. Yeah, come back tomorrow. There was a moment where I think Angelina Jolie called me back in because she wanted me to be her eyeline. And I was like, okay, so I'm doing something right.
Your eyeline is?
An eyeline is when another actor has done part of their scene and they just want to stay in the moment and they want you to be the eyeline for. So if I'm looking at you and I'm doing this scene, but then tomorrow we have to do the same scene and someone else steps in, it breaks the kind of mode of the scene. And so just those little things. So I started doing jobs where I'd get employed for 10 or 15 days and I'd end up doing like 50 or 60 days. So I was just working a lot. And then the days off that I had, I was making my own films. So the money I was earning, I was putting that back into making my own short films on the weekend.
Okay, so then we've skipped, we've skipped out a little bit of that because, of course, when I introduced you, I said that you are a writer, an actor, a producer, an entrepreneur. And this is something that fascinates me about you because it's a lot of, from what I understand, a lot of people choose a discipline, they say, I'm going to do that, and then they might branch into something else. But you've gone in and gone, okay, I'm going to do all of these things. And now you've talked about the fact that whilst you were learning on the job and observing and taking all that information on, you were also doing this sideline of doing your own stuff. So where did you go from being a stuntman and what's the other word for an extra?
Background artist.
Background artist, I like that much better. Yeah, thanks. No, I just hadn't remembered. So you've gone from being a stuntman and a background artist to now you're producing your own work. You're writing, I assume you're writing your own work as well. And then, of course, you're still pushing towards the acting. Talk to me about that journey as well.
Well, imagine doing something that you're kind of restricted from, and then all of a sudden on the weekend, you have the freedom to play around and do with what you want. And there's no one else saying, no, you can't do that. You've got to stand there or do this. So this frustration during the week of filming, I then was able to kind of pour out my ideas and my process on the weekend. So on the weekend, I would learn how to do sound or how to point the camera or whatever it may be. I was playing around with lots of stuff and then building and then jumping in front of the camera and doing performances and acting and all that kind of stuff. So it came from an urge of like, oh God, on a Tuesday I'd see something, but then I couldn't wait to try that out on Saturday and Sunday. And God, this is another story. So I used to live, when I first came to London, I thought to do this properly and enjoy London and do what I want to do, there were so many actors that were doing other jobs, working in a bar or whatever it may be, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to pour my heart into this. So I stayed in like it's like a property management company. So it's like you stay in a company that puts you in lots of different areas in London. You pay cheap rent, but you know, if the place gets sold, you got to move out straight away. And I stayed in some crazy places, but I paid a extremely cheap amount of money. I stayed in like a warehouse, abandoned pub, a care home, where else did I stay? Like the oddest places. Like, you know, I stayed in one pub because it got shut down because someone got killed.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, and I was in a warehouse that was massive, and so I was able to try all these things. So what I did was I made a different film in every one of those locations because they were locations. Yeah, I stayed in an airline company, an abandoned airline company. And for me, for filming, that's great because you got, you know, I had a warehouse that had a massive hangar in it. It was huge. I used to tell people I live in the biggest place in London. They were like, what? And you could fit 2 aeroplanes in it. It was huge.
But you could fit cameras and you could play.
You could build stories around it.
So where, Matt, does then the break come from? Because you're going back, and we're repeating myself, but I'm just kind of going over this again in my head. You've taken the Chucky story all the way through. You've done your time learning your craft. You've been working your craft and acquiring all of this knowledge, practicing your craft. Where does the first big break come from?
God, I don't know if I've had it yet.
Well, I mean,
chasing the break.
But you have. I mean, you're being very modest.
Yeah, but it's you get a lot of highs and lows in this business. So
Okay.
you kind of, you know, and I never think about that. Even when you were like introducing me and you keep reminding about it, it feels awkward because I'm like, I haven't achieved what I have so much more to achieve. And I'm so like, it feels like, you know, nothing. Although from the outset, it's a lot, and I am sort of, you know I've worked really hard, but from inside, it's like, oh no, I haven't. You know, I've still got so much more that I want to do. So I just kept working and making films, and the property company I used to live at was called Camelot.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
We did some crazy stuff. I remember doing a short film where we put loads of fireworks inside the warehouse and let them off. And if you've ever done something like that on camera, just it's
With
mental.
due respect, I live in Malta. That happens quite frequently.
Yeah, but inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
okay.
Now thinking about it, it was so dangerous. Imagine being in London, like quite close to London, in the centre, and there's a massive warehouse, and we let fireworks off all inside the warehouse. One could have got caught, and it would have been fire everywhere. And we filmed it. And it was one of the best things I've ever filmed.
Oh,
it's
my
unbelievable.
word.
Imagine fireworks. It was all bouncing from the seat, everything. So we did mental stuff. And the films got bigger, the films got better. I was pouring more money into them. And then eventually I had to submit a film to a film festival. And I think, well, I needed to call it something because they needed a production company. So I called it Camelot Films.
Nice.
So, and then the Welsh side as well with the Camelot and the dragon. So that's kind of where the sort of inception of the company started. And then as I started taking more seriously, you start understanding the business side of it, and just things become bigger, and spending more money and working with bigger cast, and, you know, trying to figure out, you know, okay, how can we do something that's really successful and that works? And then you said about the break. What was one moment was a break? I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Well, can I ask you then, whilst you're thinking about that, Prizefighter, which to me is just astonishing, absolutely astonishing. You wrote it, you produced it, you're in it, and you're alongside 2 of my favourite actors of all time. Amazing. Absolutely incredible. But the story is incredibly authentic, a true story as well. And I'm assuming motivated by the fact that your father was also a champion boxer. And you're sitting there being very modest and saying, "Oh, I don't know if I made the break yet." But my goodness, this is a huge deal. What prompted that? Where did that come from? And what was the process for that?
God, you're gonna love this story.
Oh, good.
So my father was a heavyweight champion,
Yep.
boxer, British champion in the 80s. And we look very similar now. He's not alive. He passed away from the boxing, so he's not alive. And he had boxing-related injuries. So growing up, boxing was a no-go. You know, my mum, don't you go near boxing, you know? Look at your father, and then he eventually passed away. So, you know, boxing was like the one thing, you know, my mum would never want me to do. And then I was, ready for this? I was doing some stunt work on Les Mis, the film with Russel Crowe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 2012, and an older gentleman in his like 60s was like, we'd been in this warehouse for 12 hours or 16 hours, I can't remember. Everyone was knackered. And I saw this guy squinting at me, and I was getting ready to do this big action sequence with a musket, so I was just in the zone. And he came up to me and said, "I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but you look exactly like this boxer that I used to be obsessed with in the 80s, and he's not alive, so it can't be him, and but you look just like him. And if you see a picture of my dad now, you should put a picture up, because we look identical, we're like twins." And he thought I was my dad, essentially. So then we started talking. He said, "Oh, I've got this really amazing article. I was just reading about him in because my dad was quite famous in the 80s in the UK as a boxer, and he had a tough story. So, you know, there was things that came out of that as well. And so this guy says to me, "Hey, I've got this. I was reading this article on your dad the other day. Let me give it to you." And he gave me this trade magazine, and it was an article on my dad. And then next to the article, it was this little tiny thing that said the story of Jem Belcher. And it was a guy that looked like me. And I thought, okay, you know, lots about my dad, let's read this story. And I read this story about this guy from Bristol called Jem Belcher, who was about 20 minutes away from where I'm from. And he was the youngest ever champion. He was blind at 22, and he was dead by the time he was 30. And I was looking at this picture of this guy from the 1800s, and it like looked similar to me, and I was like, okay, that's weird. So I carried on reading. I went down the rabbit hole, did loads of research, and then I would say a couple of big things happened. So he died on my birthday, July the 30th. Yeah. His mum's name was Mary, and my mum's name is Mary.
No.
And what was the other thing? And one of the last fights he had was with a guy called Henry Pierce. And my dad's last name is Pierce.
Yes.
So my original name is
Pierce.
Pierce. So that just like hit me for six.
That is insane.
Yeah.
That's like meant to be, right?
Yeah. So, and then I just went down the rabbit hole of everything. I just researched the hell out of this guy, and just thought, you know what, I need to start practicing and boxing. So I started boxing and learning how to fight, and started writing the story. And it took me 10 years to make. I think the first email I sent was in 2011, and the film was made and released in 2022. And I just never gave up.
How long did it take to write? And what did your mum say?
Yeah, it took me a long time to write, because I was aware that, you know, I'm an unknown, and to get someone like Russel Crowe or Ray Winston to commit to something from someone like me that, you know.
You knew that you wanted them, or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Why?
More stories on that.
Okay, well, yeah.
Ray Winston knew my dad, weirdly. And during filming, he said to me, I was in the operating room when your dad first had the scan, and they told him he's got something wrong with his brain. So I was like, thanks, that hit me for six.
Oh, my word.
So he knew my dad, and he's a big boxing fan. And then Russel Crowe playing the grandfather was just always in my mind to have.
Because?
It was so fitting for the character. It was just so fitting for the character.
Okay.
You know, brisk and had this presence, doesn't say much, you know. Russell had a stage of drinking and going crazy, so that side. And it just made sense. And I'm such an obsessive person. And I remember his team said no 3 times over 2 years. And I remember going out at night and running like crazy, listening to music, like trying to manifest, like, come on, you can do this, you can do this. Everyone said no, move on, he's not gonna do it. kept offering him more money, kept changing dates, kept thinking. And I just had it in my mind that he was going to do it. And I'd go out at night, run like crazy, listening to like Gladiator or, something inspiring. And then eventually, they said yes. So, but 10 years, 10 years to write and make it. It had to be perfect. The script had to be so good that when they read it, they go, okay, I don't care who's written this, whether it's, John Dory or whoever, this is an amazing script. So the script was so good, but it took a long time,
But that moment when you sit there and everybody said yes, and you're on set with the story that you're passionate about, with all these incredible coincidences that tie you to the story that you've written, with the people that you've wanted and stalked and hounded, that moment must be mind-blowing.
I didn't enjoy it. It's weird.
Why?
Just couldn't feel it. It was such a difficult experience to go through because, I had a lot of the answers for everything because I'd written the script. I was playing the lead character, so I was carrying the film. I was also producing and raising finance, and we lost money and we didn't get support from Wales, and all these different things were happening during COVID. So
Oh, wow.
it was like, yes, yes, no, no, so the film had loads of like ups and downs. And at the end of the day, the people in the background didn't really care. It was like, oh, don't worry, like, it's not my thing, it's Matt's. So I kind of had to sort out a lot of stuff. So it was like, oh, okay, great, Russel Crowe's here, but I'm thinking about how we get to the
How you
next
pay him.
stage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we'd shot 75% of the film. I don't know if I've ever told this story, I had an Amazon contract that was only going to pay based on the script and Russel Crowe being in the film. And I'd shot 75% of the film, and the last 25% was with Russell, and we hadn't shot him. So that was like, it was a like, what I came out with it was unbelievable, and the relationships and the wisdom and the kind of learning experience, but it was horrible, and I wouldn't want to go through it ever again.
Have you never had a moment where you could just sit back and go, wow, I did that? Or you just don't have that relationship with the film?
No, I hate it. Because when you write something and you put something together for so long and you have this clear idea of how it should be, and then it's not that, even if one of those things are not that, it's like, and there were so many things, when we didn't raise the amount of money that we needed, we couldn't do certain things that were in the original script. So the version you see now online looks like a great, amazing achievement, and to some extent it is, but to me it's like, that wasn't the version that I wanted to make.
You said a couple of things that really, really resonated, and I just wanted to dive into these a bit deeper. First of all, you're incredibly tough on yourself. But I've asked you this before, and I want to revisit this question. There's a lot of people that want to be in Hollywood. There's a lot of people, a lot of young women, men, maybe older men and women kids, whatever, they want to be in Hollywood. Maybe they want to be writers, maybe they want to be producers, maybe they want to be actors. And you've just described the realization, the manifestation of a dream. That is, you wanted to produce a film, you wanted to have these two huge actors in this dream, and you wanted also to write the script, to perfect the script. Let's put aside for the fact that you're giving yourself a hard time about it right now, but what is the magic that you have that the other men and women who want to do the same thing don't have? How is it that you got there? I mean, you've mentioned this you persisted, you kept going, you kept going. Is that it? What is the magic that gets you to Hollywood and not anybody else?
I think that it's not really a Matt Hookings magic, but it's more of a just general, first of all, you have to work extremely hard. Like, I don't believe anything happens overnight. So I've worked incredibly hard, almost every single day for the last 13 years in this business. So it's very, very hard. And, you have to understand there's going to be ups and downs. So you have to ride the wave and enjoy the highs and enjoy, and just sort of battle through the lows. I think then on top of that is I just wasn't interested I put money kind of last. So I'm really passionate about what I do, and I believe if you're really passionate about what you do, then you'll become good at it. And if you're good at it, you eventually make money from it. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's selling water or whatever. So money last. That's very hard for people to do because people have to, survival instincts, and they have rent and bills to pay and all this kind of stuff. And then I was never really interested in the kind of Hollywood fame side of things. So for me, it was just, I just want to work. I love working. I think working's so important for your brain. It's like as important as going to the gym or eating. It's like, it keeps your brain active, it keeps your brain young, it keeps your brain focused. So the fame side was never really like, oh, I want to do this to become famous or rich. It's like, it was the other reasons of creating and telling stories and bringing people together. And then honestly, like passion and persistence, I never give up, and it's very, very hard. Like I'm at a stage now where I don't fight for anything I don't want to fight for. But God, if you want me, if I have to fight for something, it's just, I'll fight for, like I said, like 10 years making the project, 2 years of saying no from Russel Crowe. Like there was so many times where I had calls with financiers and they were like, shut it down, it's done, it's not going to work. Lawyers, this, that, everything. Loads of people. They'd been doing it for so many years as well, saying it's not going to happen.
So where does that self-belief come from? Is that self-belief? It's self-belief. You have to believe that it's going to happen.
I think it's, for me, it's from being told that I can't do something. And not in a stubborn, arrogant kind of way, just I think the greatest thing anyone can say to you is, no, you can't do something. Because that if you have the right mentality, you can go and just go, well, actually, no, I'm going to do this now. And I'm going to do it better than I thought I was going to do it. Or I'm going to achieve it quicker. Or I'm going to get, results that were different, or whatever it may be. So I think, people always shy away from hardship and wanting to be told, like, oh, no, or don't do this. But that's great. You need that. I think you need to be told no. Otherwise, life is just like,
I think it's one of the things, absolutely, it's one of the things that we sort of are told in our current climate, in our current culture, is that no and failure is a bad thing. And unfortunately, I think that's the biggest lie, because being told no and failing is where we learn lessons and what fires us to do more and do it differently and get it right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I have some quick fire questions before I'm going to ask you about The Awakening.
Cool.
Okay. If you are, I feel like there should be some music now. Cue music. Matt Hookings, you are a producer, an actor, and you're also a writer. If you could only have an Oscar for one of those, what would it be?
Question.
Do you like the voice? What would it be?
What would it be? Welcome to the stage. I think the acting is still the biggest passion, so I'd choose the acting. But I actually enjoy, like, producing's the most stressful and horrible, but actually when you produce something, it's a great feeling. Go, wow, I got those people together. I got so and so and so and so in a room or on a film, or when I brought Russel Crowe to Malta, I don't know how I got him to come from Australia to Malta. It's just crazy. So producing's the end result of producing is very rewarding if you can get there. Acting is just brilliant. It's so much fun. Stepping into different characters and going down the rabbit hole of research. I've played a detective. I had to learn how to do that. I've played a boxer. All these different things are really, really cool to really experience. And I think that's good from experiencing that in life, because then you just get to try. It's like traveling, going to different countries and seeing different cultures. But then the writing also has a nice, it's a very soulful feeling with writing. It's almost like going to a meditation camp for a week, or just relaxing or taking time off work.
Like a cleansing process.
There we go. It's a cleansing process, because you're pouring all your ideas out in your brain. And the thing I love about all three is, it starts from here, then it goes to paper. The next project I've wrote, which is my next passion project, I started writing that on the plane back from south of France, Cannes, a couple of years ago for the film festival. And the idea just came, and then I was writing away. So they all have an enjoyable process, but I would choose acting. Yeah.
Acting.
Yeah.
Okay. So sticking with the acting theme, if there's any part in any film that you could play, that you could have rewritten, and you could be that that lead, what would that be?
That's a good question. Well, I've just played a villain in The Awakening. I'd like the idea of playing like a Bond villain. I think that'd be cool. Yeah, I think there's a side to me that people haven't seen. I'm quite nice and friendly and colourful.
You're a bit of a lovely lad from the valleys,
there you
aren't
go.
you?
Nice little lad. And that is me, but it's also nice to step into like, just a bit of a, psychotic character. And I think with villains, you have a lot of freedom with that.
This is Chucky's coming back again. I'm actually quite frightened now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just
okay.
like, imagine if I just like turn it.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, but just something where you there's no limitations, right? If you're playing a good character, you have to be good. But if you're playing a villain, you can be bad, but you can also be like sensitive. You can be emotional. Some audiences might hate you, and some audiences might feel sorry for you. So that's interesting. And then something pivotal, like, I really enjoyed playing Jem Belcher in Prizefighter because no one knew anything about this guy. This guy is unknown. He's disappeared from the history books. There's never been a book written on him. And he's the youngest ever champion. He coined the sport. He was incredibly smart, way ahead of his time, talented. And I feel like those kind of characters deserve justice to be like, sort of resurrected. So anything that has that kind of, resurrection or doesn't have any, people don't know too much about, and I would say that gravitates towards true story. So that would be the choice. I'm trying to think if there's a film or a character that I would love to play. There's a very old Terence Stamp film, which I can't think of the name of it. It came out in the 60s and it was incredible. It was just him and a woman. And again, sounds a bit sort of, it's on the thriller aspect, way ahead of its time, but he basically kidnaps this woman in a kind of nice and friendly way, brings her into a house, and then spends so much time with her that they actually become close. But obviously she never agreed to be kidnapped at the beginning. And the film is like the flip around for someone that starts really bad and then she ends up being bad. Do you mean like there's just a nice flip around of character? So I like the idea of playing something where you think it's what you expect from the beginning, and then by the end, you don't like my character or you love the character. There's a nice kind of turning point, taking you on a journey. There
nice.
We go.
I like that. I like that. I'm going to have to go and research that. In fact, Terence Stamp.
Yeah, it's
excellent.
Oh God.
It'll come to you
me crazy now.
just as we've closed this interview. I know it. I can see it happening.
Yep.
We talked about the break, and you said you didn't think that you had had the break. If you could describe what that break would look like, if you could say, this is the perfect break for me, what would it be?
In terms of the feeling or the character or what sense?
In terms of whatever way that you think you haven't yet made that break. What would success look like for Matt Hookings? Or is it just not going to happen because you're always going to drive yourself?
I think it's, whenever I do a film or a project, it's almost like starting from zero again. Every film is very different. It's like starting a new business every time. New film, new genre, new characters, new budget, new location, new crew. Like everything's different the whole time. So it always starts from scratch. So if that process was made a little bit easier, that would be like, okay, people are sort of, I don't need to worry about going from scratch again. I'm already on like, stage 5 or whatever versus starting at stage 0. But every time I hear the most successful people talking about it, they always say the same thing. I've been in Q&As with, Martin Scorsese and Johnny Depp and really, top of their game. And they're like, yeah, we're struggling to find money. We're trying to raise money for our films, or we're trying to get this film off the ground or that film off the ground. So it seems to be, it's never going to happen. And I think, I don't know, I think my path is, I think it's very similar to like what Orson Welles went through. I think he just, he was like a visionary creator, filmmaker, actor, one of the best. Did Citizen Kane at 26, and he still struggled all the way until the end, pretty much.
A struggling artist, my friend.
Yeah.
A struggling artist.
So
Look, tell me about The Awakening, because this is obviously something that is very, very key right now. This is another project of yours, and I love the way you call them projects rather than just productions, which is amazing because it puts it into a different context. What is it? Where are you taking it? You play a baddie. What? I mean, I've looked at it. I've done as much as I can because there's kind of a little bit of mystery about this at the moment. It does look like it's something like the Da Vinci Code crossed with maybe the Matrix from the visuals that I've seen. Tell me about it. What is it?
The Awakening is conspiracy thriller
Okay.
with a nice bit of action in it as well. I play one of the lead villains alongside Eddie Hall, big world's strongest man, and which makes me look tiny. So it's about a guy who's played by Justin Tinto, good friend of mine, and he uncovers his parents were spies in the 70s, and they were trying to uncover all the truth about who was running the world back then. It's kind of got an Illuminati kind of aspect to it, but it's very conspiracy heavy. And it's basically looking at like who really runs the world. You know, were certain things set up on purpose and constructed and put out into the medium to control you and all these kind of things. Some of it has, a believability about it in that sense. And it explores, COVID as well and a couple of things that happened with COVID. And it's, it's topical, it's current, there's a huge audience online for it. The amount of conspiracy theorists out there is crazy. Like, there's a lot of people that believe in every conspiracy theory, from Titanic to COVID to the Earth being flat, whatever it may be. So I think we're onto something in tapping into two different audiences: the film audience of people that want to go and see and enjoy a film, and the conspiracy theory audience that want all this stuff to be true. And it's exciting for me because what I was just describing as the struggle. This is the first project I've done where the money was available. We were able to be creative. We've been softly marketing the film for a year, so we've been able to put our hats on and do loads of really cool PR stuff. We had a big banner last year in Cannes before we started filming, and the big banner said "The Awakening," the film they don't want you to see, and there was a QR code that said "Don't scan this code," and loads of people scanned the code, and it took you to a viral video about conspiracy theories. So I think we're having the right amount of freedom to be able to build a film properly and build an audience and build the marketing. But for me, it was great to play a really, really psychotic character. And Justin's a very good friend of mine. We're brothers, and I remember one of the first days we did together, and it was a torture scene with him. And right up until before they hit action, we were just laughing and joking, and then the moment that the cameras went on, I just jumped. I just took him out of his skin because I just screamed and went, "Ah!" Really, and just changed everything. And I grabbed him and shook him and just looked in his eyes, really intensely. And at the end of the take, he was like, "Bro, what the hell? You just become a different person." And that was really fun to do because then it's like, it's nice, especially doing that with mates. So for us, it was a great project to be involved in because it just we had the freedom. We didn't have the bullshit of the system behind us controlling us in terms of we have to wait for lawyers or the accountants or the financiers or the banks we didn't have any of that. There was no what we call in the film world closing process where you have to close the finance, but you have to get all the lawyers to agree and all this and all that and all these different parties and and then the money gets released. It's a very old system of working, but so the money was there and we could just create the film. And I was able to bring in a lot of friends of mine. I worked with Peter Stormare again. There's a crazy surprise at the end of the film, which is very interesting. We got an actor that's come in that's going to turn heads, and it was very enjoyable. And we're gearing up for the release now, and I'm excited for it.
When is it release?
I would say the release is probably end of 25,
Nice.
2025.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's good. It's exciting. And like I said, we just got to work with a great group of people. And that's now become the norm. I want to work hard, work with the right people, and just make great stuff.
You did do just one thing I'm going to get you to do to camera in just a second. You just looked at me and you gave me a glimpse of that psychotic face. I've got to say, it's terrifying. Can you give it to the camera just so that people can see what they've got to look forward to?
Nice.
Whoa,
You'll
nice.
see in the film. You'll see in the film.
Okay, fair enough.
It's just like, I don't know, it's turning on. I'll tell you where that comes from. And I got some great advice from Russel Crowe, and that was like, don't always smile too much. If you smile too much, you let people in. And when you let people in, then that's when they feel comfortable enough to take advantage of you. And I thought it was like a great piece of life advice. That's from someone that's actually, been through shit. So I smile in the right moments, and then when you don't, when you need to turn it on for the audience or for the film, then you can, blank it out. So I don't know.
I'll be sitting there looking for that. You see smiling there. There you go.
That was smiling.
Matt Hookings, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
That was great fun.